Hello, I'm Mrs. Jansen, and today in our art, we'll be creating a 3D city. Cities are known for many things. They are often known for what's called landmarks. First, let's look at San Diego on the top left. One of the things that it's known for is its beautiful harbor. Now let's look at San Francisco on the top right. One of its most famous landmarks is the Golden Gate Bridge. On the bottom left, you'll notice New York City, and one of its most famous landmarks is the Statue of Liberty. On the bottom right, you see Paris, France, and one of its most famous landmarks, the Eiffel Tower. Our first vocabulary word today is cityscape, the visual appearance of a city or urban area, a city landscape, a picture of a city. The words visual appearance mean what it looks like, and the word urban often means city. Our next vocabulary words are 3D or three-dimensional forms. These are shapes that give the illusion that they occupy space. The three dimensions they have are width, length, and depth. When we look at the geometric shapes on the left, I want you to remember that they're flat. They have two dimensions, width and length. On the right, you'll see what some of these geometric shapes look like when they're in three-dimensional form. For example, a square becomes a cube. A rectangle becomes a rectangular prism. A circle becomes a sphere or a cylinder. An oval becomes a cylinder. A triangle can become a pyramid or a cone. Our next vocabulary word is concentric circles. Circles that share the same center. Today in our art, we'll be using concentric circles in the background. Let's look at warm and cool colors. On the left, you'll notice the warm colors of red, orange, and yellow. Examples of warm colors are a sunset, a pumpkin, or pink flowers. Pink is also a warm color. On the right, we're looking at cool colors. We can think of the blues, the greens, and the purples. Examples of cool colors are green grass, blue water, purple flowers, and the northern lights. Let's get started drawing a 3D city together. Please have your pencil, paper, and crayons ready. You'll see my screen change so that we can draw together. So today we'll be working in what's called portrait style. So please turn your paper vertically or the tall way. And now let's look at the very bottom of the paper. We're going to start each of our city buildings with an arrow. So at the bottom of the paper, start with a straight vertical line, and as you draw, you are going to decide how tall your building is. When you get to the top, draw a wide top of the arrow with two diagonal lines. Now let's go to the second building. We're going to start at the bottom of the paper and make sure that when you draw this vertical line, you're not going to draw on top of this diagonal line for the first building. So start at the bottom of the paper, and as you draw, decide how tall you'd like this building to be. And at the top, add the 2 diagonal lines, and that determines the width of the building. Now it's time to add our third building. And depending on your art, after you draw the third building, you can decide if you'd like to add a fourth one. Start with the vertical line at the bottom of the paper, and as you draw, decide how tall you'd like your third building. At the top, add the 2 diagonal lines for the top of the building. Remember, even though we're drawing the same lines, the same arrows, everyone draws differently. And that's one of the best things about art. So let's go to the very first arrow we drew, and we're going to go to the diagonal line on the left and add a straight vertical line that goes to the bottom of the paper. And now let's go to the diagonal line on the right and add another straight diagonal line that goes to the bottom of the paper. Now it's time to go to the second arrow, and we're going to create the second building. Go to the left diagonal line and add a straight vertical line, but please remember to lift it up when you get to something you've drawn. Now let's go to the other side and add another straight vertical line that goes to the bottom of the paper. Let's go to our third building. Straight vertical line, and if you come to something you've already drawn, remember to pick up your pencil. Some of you may have a space in between your buildings, and that's okay. Let's go to this side and add another straight vertical line that goes to the bottom of the paper. So now I've got 3 buildings in my art, and if you notice, that very first building covers part of the second building, so that means it overlaps, and it actually looks like the second building is behind the first one. So anytime we're drawing, sometimes we make a mark or a line and we wish it looked different. When I'm looking at my artwork today, I noticed that this first vertical line I drew for the arrow isn't as straight as I hoped it would be. So instead of erasing the whole thing and starting over, what I'm going to do is draw another straight line. Right now I decided that I like that line much better. So then I'm going to go back and erase only the part that I don't want. So now it's time for us to add the windows. And there's some important things to remember about windows. When we want to create the illusion of 3-dimension in our artwork, we have to remember that the sides of the windows are always vertical or straight up and down, and the top and the bottoms of the windows are always diagonal. You're going to follow the same angle or diagonal line at the top of the building for the windows on each side. So let's get started. When we draw this straight vertical line, we're deciding how tall our window will be. And I'm going to draw a straight vertical line on this side. Now I'm going to add the diagonal line at the top, and before I do, I'm going to trace the diagonal line at the top of the building, and that helps me know what the diagonal line needs to look like at the top of my window. And now I'm going to add the bottom with a second diagonal line. Remember, the side of the building or window is always a straight vertical line. So now you can connect that. Now let's go to this side. First, I'm going to trace the top of the window, and that helps me know what diagonal line I'd like, and then I'm going to add the diagonal line at the top and the bottom, and then I'm going to connect it with a straight vertical line. As we draw more windows, you'll see more of that 3D or three-dimensional illusion. So always start each window with a straight vertical line. And I like to draw the straight vertical line on the other side of the building at the same time. Now I'm going to add that diagonal line at the top and the bottom of the window, and then the vertical line for the side. And I remember that the diagonal line is similar to the diagonal line up above on the arrow. Remember to always start with that straight vertical line for the side. And use the diagonal line for the top and the bottom, and a vertical for the side. So remember, we're drawing our lines by hand. We're not using a ruler, and we're making our art by hand. So it's okay if every line isn't perfect. We want our art to look like it's made by hand. Remember not to rush and always do your best. So now as you get closer to the bottom of your building, you can decide if you'd like to add doors. And if you'd like to add doors, you're going to start with the side of the door as a straight vertical line. And then you need to remember that the top of the door is also a diagonal line, just like the top of the windows was. And then the other side of the door would be a straight vertical line. So start with that straight vertical line, and then repeat the diagonal line that you used for the top of the windows. So drawing the doors is a choice. You don't have to add them. And if you decide to add them, you can leave them like this, or you might decide to add some details. Maybe you decide that you'd like to draw handles. So now we've got our first building drawn. And remember, we all make different choices in art, and all of our art can look different. I'd like the second building to look very different. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to trace the diagonal line on the arrow, and then I'm going to add the diagonal lines for the tops of the windows and the bottom. So notice how I'm always remembering to pick up my pencil when I'm coming to something I've already drawn. And for this building, I decided that I wanted it to look like the windows went all the way to the bottom. So for the next building, I remember the sides are vertical, straight lines. And I know that I'd like to draw these windows differently. You've got your own ideas, and you can add windows how you'd like to your city buildings. Remember, if you're creating rectangular windows, that you want to make sure the sides are vertical and the top and the bottom are the same diagonal line or angle as the top of the arrow above it. I think I'd like these windows to go all the way to the edge of the building. So remember, I think it's really helpful to trace the diagonal line of the arrow before you start, and you can always go back to it and trace it again. Remember, everyone's art is going to look different. We're all making different choices as artists. And now decide if you'd like to add doors. So wherever you are with the windows on your buildings, I'd like you to pause or take a break. And you can go back to the windows later, but right now we're going to create the background together. Now it's time for you to make another choice. Where would you like to place that first circle in the center? In the center of the concentric circles. So go ahead and make your choice and draw your first circle. And know that this is the center, and the next circle you draw shares that center. So the circles we're drawing are circles found in nature. They're not perfect geometric circles with predictable edges. There's circles in nature with unpredictable edges, like organic circles. You want to make sure the circles that you draw are about a finger space away so that you'll be able to add color. Now, depending on where you placed your circle, as you draw the larger circles around it, they may go off the page. So what you need to do is imagine where that circle would start. So for example, if I'm drawing this one, I can just draw the side of the circle that I would see. And I don't have to draw the top of it because it goes off the page. When I come to something I've drawn, I always remember to pick up my pencil. And if I've got spaces in between the building, I often will use my finger to follow where that circle would be, and then I place it on the other side. So here I'm not going to start at the top, I'm actually going to start at the side. And I don't have spaces in between my buildings, but notice that that circle comes around on the other side. And now I'm going to add the circle to fill the whole page. And I can look at the circles I've drawn and decide, for example, this is a really large space and I think I'd like to add another curved line. Now I can look at the windows again and I can decide if I'd like to add any details. I think I'd like these windows on this building to look like they have 3 sections. So I'm going to add some vertical lines. Remember, you don't have to add or make the same choices that I do. And that when you look at your art, you're making the choices that you believe are best for you and your artwork. And you can even add more details on the windows or the doors. And the last thing we're going to do is talk about color. I know that you've now know what the difference is between warm and cool colors. So as you create your art today, you get to decide where you place the warm and cool colors. Some of you might decide to place the cool colors in the background. You might be making connections with the northern lights or other cool colors that you can think about in nature. You'll be using the blues, the greens, and the purples in the background for the concentric circles. And then, for contrast or difference, you'll consider using the warm colors for the buildings. The reds, the yellows, the oranges, and the pinks. There'll be other artists in our group that make a different choice. Some artists will decide to make a connection with the warm colors. Maybe you're thinking of a sunset, the reds, the yellows, the oranges, and the pinks. So you'll add all those warm colors in the background of your artwork. And when it comes to the buildings, you'll consider using the cool colors, the blues, the greens, and the purples. It's entirely up to you how you complete your artwork, and I hope you've enjoyed creating a 3D city today and adding the concentric circles for a background. I look forward to making art with you again soon.